All right. Thank you all for coming. Nancy, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. I'm really excited about this. So just very brief background. We make Rule Breaker Snacks makes vegan, allergen-free blondies and brownies. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I've been in business since 2015. And I am on my fourth co-packer. So my whole goal today is to try to, I knew nothing about this when I started, and it's to try to impart some wisdom to you guys so that you can hopefully avoid some of the things that I had to learn the hard way. So the co-packer thing, it's not the most sexy part of food manufacturing or owning a food brand, but it is probably the most important relationship that you will have for your business. And so there's a couple of things. I'm assuming that most of you are probably don't have co-packers yet or have just started. And so my first one, I couldn't find a gluten-free vegan co-packer in the New York area. So I literally started just making phone calls to bakeries that I knew were vegan and gluten-free. And I tried to find one that way. It was very hard. I did by the time I finally did find one in Queens, New York, I was so grateful that they had agreed to make my stuff that I basically just kind of, I let it up to them to make all the rules. And unfortunately, that was kind of a mistake. So, but let's step back for a second. And so I want to go over a few basics. One thing is that it's very important when you're making a food product to have a pretty good idea of what kind of equipment you need before you even approach a co-packer. So everything from, a mixer, an oven, sheet pans. In this case, I'm naming all the stuff for baking. We use a particular kind of extruder to make our brownies in little single circles rather than like big trays. So it really pays to know, because you want to try to find a co-packer that already has that equipment, because that's obviously going to be a cost savings. Food manufacturing equipment can cost, even used, can cost at least $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, all the way up to $150,000, $200,000 for a piece of machinery. So you want somebody who already owns it, and you also want someone who has the experience of working with that equipment and knows all the little ins and outs, including how to fix it when it breaks down and whether it will really work for your product. So that's number one. I would start by just making a list of the equipment that you think you're going to need. And it could change and can add, but that's important. The other thing is, so I basically, I'm going to step away from a second and tell you something that I'm still doing right now. I basically am always trying to find co-packers, even though I'm pretty happy with the one I'm with now. I'm constantly Googling, a vegan contract manufacturer or co-packer, and just keeping kind of a spreadsheet so that they're all, at the ready if there are any problems that come up. And so I call them and I find out about the equipment. That's the first thing. And then if they seem interested or they seem like they could make your product, the next thing that you need to do is you can't just kind of jump right in and say, okay, when can you start? You need to plan a plant trial, which is like a trial run at the co-packer. Most of them will agree to this without any problem. Some of them may want to charge you for it. And I would ask them to please do a free trial and say that, you're going to be bringing them your business, and because they can actually charge, as much as like $600 to $2,000 a day for doing something like this. And you'll have to book a full day with them at least. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind and also to budget for. then, you know, are they really, so before you even plan the, go and do a plant trial, you know, do they have the stuff that you're looking for? So for instance, do they have the correct documentation from the health department in their area? Some don't. You really have to make sure and ask to see their certificates. It's called SQF level. Are they, if you're looking for, you know, vegan, do they use any animal products in any of the stuff that they make? That's important to know. If they do, are you okay with that? Or do they have really great clean out procedures in between? You have to ask those kind of questions. You know, if you're going to be looking for another thing like being gluten-free, are they actually certified gluten-free? Are they kosher certified, if that's important to you? So you need to have kind of a little, I would actually make like a checklist of all the things that you want to go over during an initial conversation. So I always start with the equipment, then I ask about their certifications. Before you hand over any kind of, you know, recipe that you have, it's very, very important that you make them sign a non-disclosure agreement, because that says that they, you know, your recipe is your property. And then on top of your formula, I would put confidential, property of, and then your brand name, so that it's all very laid out. So nobody thinks, oh, you know, gee, this is a great recipe for whatever, and I can go ahead and, you know, even if I don't get them as a client, I'm going to make their stuff. So that's pretty important. If you think that they sound promising and you want to actually go ahead and have a trial, which is basically where you either they order ingredients or you order ingredients and you set up a day of production with them. One thing that you need to do is make sure that they're using the same ingredients, whatever it is. Like in my case, it would be the same chocolate chips, the same you know, date paste, all of the things that they're going to actually be using in my product. I want to make sure that they test, that they do the plant trial with. So it's not a good idea if they say, I mean, if it's baking powder or it's salt or something like that, it's not such a big deal, right? But if it's a main ingredient of yours, it should be from the supplier that you're actually going to be purchasing your ingredients from. Now, the good news about this is if you ask nicely for a supplier of a certain ingredient, it's very likely that they'll give you a sample and send it directly to the co-packer, so that you can, you know, if you say, well, if we're going to go with these people and start producing, and we're going to buy a lot more of your ingredient, chances are they'll actually give you a free sample or at least a reduced price for that. So when you get to the co-packer, it's really important to walk around the entire facility. They should want to give you a tour and show it off. And I would watch for a couple of things. One is does it look chaotic? I mean, some of these places are crazy, right? With people running around and ingredients stacked willy-nilly or spilling all over the place. And it looks like a chaotic place. And I would say, honestly, that's a red flag. They're going to have trouble making your product in a timely fashion if they're not organized. So that's one thing. The other thing is, do they have the actual storage space that you're going to need? Sure, you may be very tiny now, you're just starting out, let's say, but with any luck, you know, you'll be scaling up pretty soon. So if they have, you know, I don't know, one very small mixer, let's say, or and they don't have very much room to store ingredients for you or to store your finished product, which you also need storage for that, then, you know, they may not be able to scale up with you. Now, that it could be that they're still a great co-packer to start off with, but in that case, I would always be optimistic and think that, yeah, I'm going to grow and I'm going to need more production capability. And that's, again, another reason to always keep on looking for the next one. So, so then when you're there, you really have to watch them make your stuff. So again, by this time you will have had conversations with them about, how to make your formula and the ingredients and any little tricks or anything that's important. What you don't want to do, and I really hope you take this to heart, you don't want to be the kind of brand owner who expects to go to the co-packer every time they have a production run. That is really not a good idea. First of all, it will eat up an enormous amount of your time. That's number one. And that's time that you can be spending, approaching retailers, doing marketing, doing your social media. You don't have time for that. That's a bad idea. Also, the co-packer will not like that. Okay, they don't want generally to be supervised. So what your goal really is to find somebody who, after a few runs, is really able to do the product pretty much perfectly without you being there. So you do not want to be there. That said, it's really great if you could possibly find one that's within driving distance. These days especially, you don't want to be getting on a plane to go anyplace. So if you can find one that is within driving distance and that you could get to pretty quickly, if you had any kind of problems, or let's say you just wanted to pick up some samples, to take home with you, or some product to send out yourself, it's great if they're within driving distance. So when you get there and you say, now you've taken your plant tour and now it's time to watch them make the product and package it. So you really want to see the whole thing. And you should have some kind of idea of how long it's going to take. Again, I suggest booking an entire day. And you want to see what every step. Okay, so let's say they use a mixer. They mix it up, then they have to put it in baking pans and every step. How long is each step taking them? So why is this important? Well, because co-packers, they may charge you by, let's say, the unit. They may charge you by the jar of jam or by the brownie or whatever. But actually what they're really doing is they're charging you by how much time it takes them to make the product. And often, if they're really slow or some of their machinery, let's say their packaging machinery is really slow, it ends up being a big bottleneck. So let's say they can mix up everything, all your ingredients really quickly, but then it takes them forever to do the next step. You're going to pay for that extra time. And so at that point, you kind of have to think about, well, as I said in my sheet here, your production is only as fast as your slowest step. So if that's the case, you may think, okay, well, the reason it's so slow is because they only have 20 sheet pans, and so they're not able to keep on putting things on pans and putting them in the oven. They have to wait for those 20 sheet pans to bake up, and then they come out, and then they have to, they have to prepare them for the next round. So maybe you want to buy them some extra sheet pans or ask them to buy some extra sheet pans. This is just, again, a brownie example because that's what I know best. But this is the kind of thing where you really have to have your, be aware and take notes and time them for each specific step. Then, I have a thing where I think it would be really helpful to make a kind of flow chart or just a list of what your procedure is, like from start to finish, from the moment you order your ingredients to the part to the point where you're shipping finished product to a store, or you're picking it up so you can deliver it to a store, whatever, because you need to make sure that somebody is going to do each of these things, and you can't really assume that a co-packer will do it all for you. Like they may be able to take it through packaging your finished product, but maybe they don't put it on a truck, on a pallet for you, so it can be, it can be loaded onto a truck. Well, who's going to do that? Or is it extra? Do they have extra charges? So one of the things that they is the amount of money that they charge, that a co-packer charges, is called a tolling fee. And you need to find out what that tolling fee includes. It's usually a per unit, so per jar jam, per brownie, or whatever. It's usually a per unit fee, but what does it include? Does it include everything? Does it include packing the stuff into cartons? That actually turns out to be very important. The other thing that a lot of newbie brands, the mistake that newbie brands make, and I made this up front at the start, was allowing your co-packer to purchase your ingredients for you. It sounds great. It sounds like you have no experience buying these ingredients, and they'll deal with the suppliers, and they already have connections, let's say, and stuff like that. So it sounds like it would be a wonderful thing to be able to get them to do this. It's not. It's terrible, because they immediately will give you an enormous markup on all of your ingredients. And you will end up spending, I am not kidding, at least 50% more in general when they buy your ingredients for you. So I knew nothing about purchasing ingredients. I was a health journalist before I went into this. I knew zero about the food business, but I researched it. I called sales reps at various ingredient suppliers, created those relationships, and as a result, I saved a lot of money. And your cost of goods, or your COGS, is really like the basis upon which you build everything. Your wholesale price to retailers, your profit margins, everything. So you really have to get that down as low as possible. Hold on, my dog is making noise. Oscar, stop it. Stop it. Excuse me. So I would also, I keep a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet, where sorry, that's Oscar again, where you know exactly how much each ingredient costs by the pound, including shipping, right? And so therefore, when you add it all up, you know how much 1 pound of your product takes to make at the base level. Then you add in that tolling charge, so you know how many units per pound your recipe makes, and then you add in the tolling charge and you get your base costs. And so if you don't know that, you're not going to be able to figure out anything from there, if you don't have that information. So like I said, this is not very sexy, but honestly, it really pays to do all of this kind of stuff. And then in addition to, so let's say you find a great supplier for, this just happened to us. We use sprinkles in one of our products. It's a birthday cake blondie, and the sprinkles are colored by plants, and they don't have any crap in them, and they are, so I really researched. Took me a while to find a great supplier of sprinkles. So then I found it, and we had the same supplier for a couple of years, and then just this year they said, oh, you know what? We've decided to increase our minimum quantity, which is the minimum you have to order, to 2,000 pounds of sprinkles at a time. And I'm like, what? Because I can't, even though we're growing and we're doing pretty well, I can't use up 2,000 pounds of sprinkles, nor do I that quickly, nor do I want to put out for 2,000 pounds of sprinkles if I don't have to. And so I had to, find an alternate supplier again. And for our stuff, it's vegan, it's top 11 allergen free, kosher certified, non-GMO project verified. I mean, there's a lot. It's hard to find suppliers. So just like always looking for a co-packer, I would always be looking for alternative suppliers, so a secondary supplier. So when your sprinkle guy says, oh, sorry, we've decided now you have to order 2,000 pounds at a time, or forget it, you have a backup right there, and you can say, oh, well, okay, I'm going to just use my backup. So that's another really important thing. Going back to the co-packer for a second. So one of the things that's trickiest when you're just starting out is figuring out kind of what the volume is going to be, and what, co-packers are going to want to do at least enough to fill a whole day of production. So you've got to keep in mind that in addition to them, the time that they actually spend making your product, they're going to spend time setting up and measuring out the ingredients. And then they're going to spend a lot of time cleaning up after a day of production. So they're going to want something that takes up most of that time, because they're not going to want to make one product for half a day in the morning and then another product for another brand in the afternoon. So, you should agree on some kind of volume, and that is appropriate for each time you go into production. And that's where having timed them and figuring out how many units they can make during a day is going to come in really, really handy, because you'll kind of know where to start. And so, in addition to that, you should always ask, well, what's the minimum? What's the least amount that you'll do for me? And when you're first starting out, they probably will do like 1 day's worth, and maybe they'll even do half a day's worth. I mean, I don't know, it depends on the co-packer, I guess. So you'll have to kind of come to an agreement about, what is the minimum quantity you can order from them. As you go on and you scale up, they will, in order for you to be attractive to them, they're going to want, not just one production day a month, but more than that. So they're going to want to know that you're, you can say, oh, well, I'm starting with this volume now because we're still small, but we have plans to get into a whole bunch of stores. And then by the end of the year, we should be at this. So, so you ask them, what's the minimum batch size? That's the amount that they're making in their machinery at one time. How many batches do they make during the day? And then again, because you always want to be looking out for those day that hopefully will come really soon, how many could they possibly give you? So if the truth is that they only have 1 day a week to give, 1 day a month, to give you, because they're so jam-packed with other brands and other clients, again, you should be looking for somebody else eventually, because that 1 day will hopefully not be enough. Soon you'll need 2 days or 3 days and more. Okay, almost done with all these technical things, but so you need a contract with the co-packer. And once you actually choose who you want to go with and you feel good about it, do not just have like a one-page agreement, or you're just going to get screwed. I mean, I can't say it any other way. You really need to have things spelled out. And unfortunately, I would say that your best bet is to use an attorney, and use one who actually knows about co-packers, who does these kind of contracts, because there are a lot of like, what happens if a batch goes it doesn't taste right. Who pays for that? What happens if they're late? What happens, there's a lot of different things that can happen during production. Food is really unpredictable. Machinery breaks down. All kinds of things happen. You want all the consequences spelled out in that contract. So I really wouldn't skimp on that. I did not have a contract with my first co-packer. Again, I was just kind of so grateful that they were taking me on, and I really ended up being screwed financially. To be honest, it was very, very, very expensive. I'll give you an example. This first co-packer was charging me $1.35 per brownie just to make the brownies, okay? My latest one, it's 18 cents. So that's the difference, that if you're smart and you try to negotiate, you can really make a difference there. And a lawyer can help you with that as well. All right. And then the last thing is, look, I love this business. I get up every morning and my eyes pop open at like 5:30 in the morning, and I'm just so excited to get to my desk. I really, really love it. I'm still very passionate, but it is a really trying business, and something goes wrong, usually at the co-packer or in production, every single day, just about. An ingredient doesn't arrive on time, a truck doesn't pick stuff up, a piece of machinery breaks down. So my suggestion is, especially when you're starting out, to build in a lot of extra time. So don't promise a retailer, retailers are gonna wanna what's your lead time? When can you get this to me? And of course, you really wanna make a good impression. So you're like, yeah, right away, next week. Don't do that to yourself. It's just going to add to a lot of stress. Say, well, our typical lead time is 14 days or whatever. So you build in a little time for yourself, because things are almost always going to take longer than you've planned. And that old adage, under promise, over deliver. It's a really good idea with retailers too. Like I said, my final point is, before I take your questions, is literally I would always, always, always be looking for the next co-packer. Even if you love the one that you're with, and there's a good chance that when you are successful and you grow, you might need one on the other side of the country to be able to supply, well, I'm on the East Coast, so to supply the West Coast. You should always be looking, and that way you'll always have somebody in your pocket when you're ready to either leave or grow.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Nancy. Sounds like the theme that I heard on a previous presentation was, for you in this industry, is handling daily disaster with relative grace. So it sounds like you've grown to do that. So I'll start off with a question that I have. Sure. And for everyone else, you can come on here and introduce yourself, and please do, if you'd like to turn on your camera and ask your question to Nancy directly, or like I'll get to here in a second, you can type in your question and I can do it for you as well. But my question is as you did scale, when a retailer was like, hey, we're ready, we want 2,000 units, by next week, and then you went to your co-packer and you had to tell them, hey, we need 10 days of production rather than 5, like what were those challenges like? And do you have any advice about kind of that growth specifically, or is it just kind of like navigating with grace, and it's really tricky? I don't know if you have any scale pointers specifically.
Yeah, so one of the things that will work best with the co-packer from the very start, and it'll help also with knowing your timeline, is scheduling. So let's say let's say you're only going to do 1 day of production to start because you're little, a month. And so, it's like the 15th of the month. Every day is your day at that co-packer. So then that, you can deliver basically to a retailer, let's say a week after that. So I would get on some kind of regular schedule. What doesn't work that well, if a co-packer has a lot of other customers, meaning brands, and the good ones usually will, it doesn't work trying to get on the production schedule really like at random, like all of a sudden, because they plan out their entire month. It's a working bakery, right? So or co-packer, excuse me. So they don't want any downtime. They only make money when they are producing goods. So they're going to try to schedule everybody, all their clients, they're going to try to schedule them out. So it's better to have a particular day or 2 days or whatever it is that you need, or 3 days, so that you know that you have the production coming up, and then you know what to tell retailers. Does that answer your question, Eric?
Perfect.
I think you're on mute.
Yep, nope, we're good. That was great. I want to see, Doug, are you available to introduce yourself quick and ask a couple questions that you have?
Hey.
Hi, Doug.
Hey. Hey, Eric. Hey, thanks, Nancy, for doing this.
Sure.
So you said something about make sure they have space to store your product, which my co-packer wants that product out of there the next day. They don't want to store it for me. So because they've got hundreds of customers, I guess my question is that industry practice that they actually warehouse your product for you?
No, you're right. So, well, a couple of things. I have had a co-packer warehouse some of my product because they were also actually doing like fulfillment of online orders, which didn't work out really well. So I wouldn't recommend that, to be honest. But even if they're only storing it, what I meant was kind of temporary storage. Let's say you have a production run, and then you can't schedule a truck to pick up your stuff for a week or two. You want to know that they have the room to store it, at least temporarily. And so it's something that's often overlooked, and I wish I had known. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you find these different co-packers?
So a couple of different ways. I always, like I said, always Googling. Like I say once a month, honestly, I spend like an hour Googling, vegan, gluten-free co-packer, New York, or whatever, to try to find ones that I have. A lot of them don't have websites or have really crappy websites. And then there's the Specialty Food Association has a co-packer list. You do not need to be a member. I would Google Specialty Food Association co-packers or contract manufacturers, and you should be able to get, they have an updated list. It's not much. It'll say, gluten-free co-packers, and it'll have a list of the names of the companies and the contact person and the phone number, but at least you can get a start that way. And then I call, I'll call and ask them, feel them out, tell them what I make and what, equipment we use, and start there. Like I said, that's always the first thing for me. I have bought, full disclosure, I did buy equipment for co-packers early on because they said, well, we need this, and and we don't have it. And I was kind of desperate, and I wish I hadn't, because by the way, when you leave, trying to get a piece of equipment out of a co-packer, like a 160 quart mixer, is not the easiest thing in the world. But so I would try to find one that has what you need. Honestly, that's where I would start.
Not to hog the conversation here, but how important do you think it is to have a co-packer in the same area where you are? So I'm in Denver, my co-packer's in Denver, which I really like. Yeah. I'm very reluctant to move to a co-packer.
Personally, I said earlier, they don't really want you hanging around supervising their production, but there are problems, right? Or sometimes you need, I've had order mix-ups where the wrong products got delivered to a retailer. And it was great that I was able to go to the co-packer, pick up the correct product in my car, you know, my station wagon, and then drive it to the retailer and deliver it. And that was a really important aspect. So I would say it's really worthwhile trying to find somebody who is within a day's, you know, a day's drive. So even if it's 4 or 5 hours, you can get there by car. You don't need to book a plane. I mean, and I think obviously at this time, it's more important than ever to be doing that. So yeah, I think you're really lucky. Mine's not as close as that. Mine's like an hour and a half away, but that's the best I could do.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. What do you make?
We make dry meat substitute mixes.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
So beef,
What's the
chicken.
brand name?
Sorry, veggie, VEJJE.
Cool. That sounds great. Good for you, and good for you for finding one. It sounds like you found a good one.
You know, nothing's perfect, but we've managed to work through the problems. So
great. And you know, Doug, you bring up a really, really good point. So I went through all this laundry list, and this is all stuff that I learned, like I said, the hard way for the most part. But honestly, the other part is not getting too crazy about things not being perfect, right? So especially at the beginning, they're going to take probably at least 3, 4, 5 times, maybe 6 times where they're doing production before they get your product completely, you know, down. And so you have to, you know, be cognizant of that. And if they're sometimes, you know, for no fault of their own, they won't be able to produce the exact quantity that you ordered. You have to kind of be, you know, willing to, as long as somebody doesn't make a serious mistake, willing to cut them some slack every once in a while.
yeah, no, absolutely. I found that to be true. Every run, they get better and better.
That's great. It shows that they're trying too then, which is wonderful.
That's right.
Yeah.
A for effort.
And Doug, there was also a huge comprehensive co-packing list that Rodeo CPG sent out earlier during the pandemic, earlier this spring. And it's a huge free resource, free database. So I'll make sure to send that around as well.
I would like that too, Eric.
Yeah,
please.
I'll send that. Yeah. Apparently, it's like they claim it's like the largest comprehensive list ever.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and they're like totally being cool about it and just saying, "Hey, everyone should have this. Please send it around." So, I'll kind of send that along with all these notes and everything today.
And not to interrupt, and I believe, but correct me if I'm wrong, that co-packers have certain specialties. You know, like lawyers have specialties, so do co-packers. So the co-packer that's Nancy's using probably is not the co-packer for us and vice versa. So
No.
our co-packer only does dry mixes. That's all they do, 100% dry mixes. And that's sort of a guess, but that's what I'm assuming is the case.
Doug, you're 100% right. And that should have actually been exactly the first thing that I said, is that you want to, it's like with like. So you're absolutely right. And that I alluded to that with the equipment, but right, I went to baked goods co-packers because I'm making a baked good. You don't, you know, if I was making a dry mix, these people would be like, what are you coming to me for? You know, it's like, and throw up their hands. You really have to match up. That's the first step, is to do a good match. You're right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Salvador, are you available to introduce yourself and ask your question? Otherwise, I can read.
Yes, absolutely.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks, Nancy, for all your information. Very, very useful.
Good.
I followed the list that Eric sent earlier, and gosh, you followed it to a T, and it was very informative the way you illustrated all the bullet points of it. So thank you for doing that, taking your time. Oh, I was thinking of a million questions, obviously. I'm sure we all know while you're talking, right? And one of the things that I have a kind of like a good problem to have right now is that my brand is suddenly starting to accelerate in growth. So all these information webinars, Erica, and all these things that I'm learning, self-teaching and learning from all folks like you, keep surfacing new questions. Like, for instance, now I'm starting to get orders that are bigger, larger orders, right? And so, as a little guy, and hopefully maybe a medium-sized guy soon, I'm starting to get these orders that are really starting to kind of puncture into the cash flow, right?
Yeah.
And so I haven't done it yet, but I'm kind of reluctant to ask a client if I should ask them for half the cost of the order up front. I don't know any other way to smooth it out, right? Just say it is. Is that appropriate? And packing, I got to buy the pouches. I got to buy this. I got to buy that. I got everything to fill the order, as you well know.
Yeah.
So what can you give me some light at the end of the tunnel here?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The first is congratulations on growing your business, because that's really hard to do, and it sounds like it's working. So yay! So you can ask. If it's a smaller store, they might actually go for it. Some of the bigger ones, they're not going to, but I'm not sure who you're selling to right now. But a small store that you have a personal relationship with, and I just mean like 1 or 2 locations or something like that, rather than a big chain, they might be willing to do that. Or they might be willing to give you 30-day terms, which would be, better. I mean, I will tell you that, the bigger stores, like I'm in Kroger, and it's great in one way, but it's 90 days, and that's from the time they receive the order. And, I'm fronting a lot of cash.
Right.
The other thing is, and it may be too early for you to do this yet, but there is something called factoring. Have you ever heard of factoring?
Yeah, as you mentioned about, always looking for a plan B, C, D, and E.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always looking every department that part of the company, there's 82 departments, right? And one of it is, funds. Another one is pouches. Another one is a co-pack. Another one. So yeah, I'm looking at plan A, B, C, and D in each one of these departments. Yeah. So I've looked into that, but it's kind of expensive doing that, right? But yeah, I get that that's an option. But I guess I just wanted to.
Or you can do what I did and take a home equity line of credit on my house.
Yeah, and that's one of the letters in that department of the plans, right?
Yeah.
Somebody that I hope to graduate to get to where you're at one day. So I guess in that path to get to where you've gotten.
Let me ask you something. What kind of product do you have? Tell me about it.
I roast and glaze nuts.
Ooh, that sounds good. So one thing that where they do pay really regularly, and it's just great, is Amazon. Are you on Amazon?
Not yet.
So I would highly suggest getting on there. Even if you don't have a lot of money to spend on keywords and sponsored ads and all of that stuff, Amazon pays by depositing money directly into your checking account every 2 weeks. And it is really good for cash flow, I have to say. So I started off in brick and mortar, and I really didn't know much about Amazon. Even though I'm a big Amazon shopper, I still didn't know much about it. And so we kind of didn't really do too much with it until about 2 years ago. And now it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of our business. And especially, lots of experts are saying that, of course, online food shopping is more important than ever during this whole thing, and will probably continue to increase in importance. So I think it would be worth looking into. The other thing about Amazon is they have a bunch of fees, and it's true, but it's very transparent in that you will know. Remember, I was talking about COGS earlier and keeping track of your cost of goods. You will really know to the penny what selling some of your nuts on Amazon is going to cost, and it will actually help with cash flow.
Great. Well, thank you for your suggestions, and I appreciate again your time, Nancy.
Sure.
And Salvador, we had a presentation a while back all about Amazon. So I'd be happy to send that over to you as well.
Would you please, Eric? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm filing everything that you do send. And like I said, the itinerary of topics that Nancy carried us, that was very useful. So thank you for sending that as well, everything she spoke about.
Good. I really hope I can save you guys some of the grief that I went through. Honestly, that's my main goal here.
Nancy, wondering if there are any, horror stories or kind of like bottlenecks that you repeatedly had to go through. Like, is there one thing that one or two things that like the second co-packer, the third co-packer, like some of the same things were happening more than once, or is there any?
Weirdly enough, Eric, they all had their own unique unique problems. But I will tell you, I will tell you one of my horror stories, which is that my last co-packer, this was just last summer though, they weren't handling our ingredients carefully, and we use a couple of syrups in our formula, and the cap from one of the syrups fell into the mixing bowl and they didn't catch it. And so we ended up with little pieces of cap in an entire batch of blondies. Okay. Nobody caught it. They were packaged, they were sent out to the stores. And then a customer, like a individual customer, yes, she said, I found this thing in my blondie, right? And she sent me a photo. And, bless her heart, all she wanted was a replacement. She wanted one blondie that didn't have a piece of plastic in it. Yeah. So, we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
You're like, take 10 boxes of blondies.
Right. I probably sent her 20. I was like, whatever, please. Yeah. And that was actually the only customer who brought it up. But we were able, because of the way the piece of plastic looked, we were able to identify it. Anyway, and then I had to make the difficulty, that was horrible, but I can laugh about it now, but we had to make the decision about, well, what happens if more people find this, and what are we going to do about it? And we decide to, be proactive, and we actually had a voluntary recall. Oscar. We actually had a voluntary recall, which was, let me tell you, you don't want to do it, but if you don't have to, because it involves the FDA and all kinds of things. And then, but it was a really good thing that we did, because we ended up, people on social media, we had to announce it, everybody on our website and on Instagram, they all said, oh my gosh, you guys are so great that you did this voluntarily, and you're being so transparent and so upfront about it. And so I actually think, in a weird way, it helped us build some credibility with the retailers too, because we called the retailers and said, look, this happened. We didn't mean to do it. We feel terrible, and we sent out replacements to all the retailers. And this brings up another thing. Make sure that your co-packer is putting, an individual lot code on every production run, so that if something like this happens, you can keep track. You will know what the production, the lot code should be on every package, and it will tell you immediately which products you need to, take back and which ones you don't. So that's my worst horror story. There were other ones too, like,
That's excellent.
Is that good enough of a horror story for you? And look, I'm still standing. I survived.
Yeah, way to handle the challenges for sure. Well, we're kind of coming up toward the end of our hour here, but just definitely want to give everyone the floor to ask a question. Even if it's there's no dumb questions, anything at all for Nancy. We have a few more minutes.
Sure. Believe me, I've been there, done that, so there are no dopey questions.
I'd love to know where you were getting your sprinkles, where you found as your backup. I own Freely Vegan, and I think I know the place that you had the minimum order, because we were looking at supplying sprinkles under our own label, and we were about to do it, and then COVID hit, and we aren't going to events anymore. And we were doing half our retail sales at 20, 30 events a year. And so we decided to hold off until we're live in, you know, seeing people in person again. But we couldn't find a backup that would have the sprinkles that we're top 8 allergen free, and so and gluten free as well. And so I couldn't find a backup that didn't repackage where there were allergens.
Oh, right. So what area of the country are you in?
Our base is Ohio, but we manufacture in Washington State.
Okay, so I was using Polar sprinkles, P-A-U-L-A-U-R, and that was the one that said the minimum quantities were really high. And then I switched over to a company called Tri-State Sprinkles.
Okay, that's the one that we were looking at supplying, but they had a minimum order of $2,000, I think, not $2,000.
So what I did was I called the owner of the company. First I emailed them. They had like a contact, you know, email on there. I filled out the form and I said, we want to buy this. And I called him. He called me. I said, if you could please call me. And he told me that he had these crazy minimum quantities. And then I said, well, is there a distributor, you know, in your area, in our area that would sell them, you know, in smaller quantities? And he found me a distributor in the area. And now we buy them in 50-pound boxes. And they're pretty inexpensive, actually. So I should call him back or email him back and ask him if there is a distributor.
We're looking at being a distributor. So,
oh, you're looking at being a distributor. Oh, that's great. Yeah. I should come to you. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought you make a product that uses sprinkles. No, that's great. It's a great product. We love it.
Yeah, of being a supplier for sprinkles, because every time we go to an event where we sell our cake mixes and our other baking mixes and flours and all that sort of thing, our egg replacement, we had cake samples and people wanted the frosting and they wanted the sprinkles.
Yeah.
And so we thought, well, if we're going to bring out frosting mixes, maybe we should do sprinkles as well. But we would
you'd make a killing on Amazon. You should do it on it. You should sell those on Amazon too. Wow.
Yeah, we probably will in the future. Well, I'll keep in touch with you if we decide to become a distributor. Hopefully we can get the other prices.
Please. Always looking for new sources of sprinkles. Thank you.
We're here to inform and make new deals and friendships.
Yay, sprinkles. Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, I took a lot of notes. So for those of you who were listening closely to all this great information today, don't worry, I'll send out, I got about 2 pages worth of notes already to everyone after this. The recording will be available. Again, we're now on the kind of community group, free Facebook page, a group to kind of, you can ask your peers questions. You could, you'll have access to this information. But yes, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you especially to Nancy for being here and being our co-packing expert. And yeah, don't forget to always have your next co-packer ready, because you never know.
There you go. If you learn nothing else, just that one thing, it'll be worth it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nancy.
All right, great to meet you all. Good luck.
Be safe.
Thanks. Bye, Eric. Thank you.